I love the New Day. I love them as a team. I love them as heels. I love them as faces. Hell, I love them individually. I think Kofi Kingston is super good in the ring. I think Xavier Woods is a tremendous mic talent and an invaluable personality that allows for cross-promotion between the gaming and wrestling communities. I think Big E deserves a world title run. I think Big E's thighs should have their own network special. What? That's what I think though, and ultimately my opinion is pretty bloody insignificant. So what does the WWE actually have planned for the New Day? Well, that's a tough question to answer, because it honestly feels like the WWE doesn't have any plan for them, despite being some of their most promising, popular, and marketable talents on their entire roster. In 2015, I attended WrestleMania live in person, and it was a hell of a show. I had a great time. It's one of the most memorable live wrestling experiences I've had. But one particular part of it that I remember for probably the wrong reasons was the kickoff show four-way match for the tag team titles. Featured in this rather hastily thrown together distraction were the teams of Cesaro and Tyson Kidd, the champions at the time, the Usos, Los Matadores, and as an afterthought featured within an afterthought, the New Day. This was before their heel turn and massive push, so there was very little fanfare or attention drawn to the fact that New Day were involved at all. I don't think anybody really felt there was a chance that any of the challenging teams would go home with the titles. But I do vividly recall vocalizing my disappointment that WWE didn't seem to have any idea what they were doing with New Day, and that there was huge potential here being wasted. A year after the fact, WWE had seemingly gone out of their way to shut my mouth, as New Day had turned both heel and right back around to face again, and were possibly the most over entity in the company. I believe it was Big E who noted on Twitter that around the time of WrestleMania 31, they had to beg to even be acknowledged, but come WrestleMania 32, they were selling so much merch that they were being given more opportunities than they knew what to do with. Comparing their inclusion in WrestleMania 31 to their highly memorable appearance at WrestleMania 32, it's like night and day, though hopefully not a night with a full moon, because we all know what happens to Saiyans when that scenario arises. Yes, at WrestleMania 32, the New Day got their moment in the spotlight, where they burst out of a box of bootios. The production values were mind-blowing. The fanfare was undeniable. The New Day were in their element. And then they got to the ring and had a meaningless six-man tag that was completely overshadowed by the appearance of three legends, Shawn Michaels, Mick Foley, and Stone Cold Steve Austin. So while New Day certainly had a large presence at WrestleMania that year, much like a great deal of WrestleMania 32, it was ultimately meaningless and served no real purpose. But hey, that doesn't necessarily mean the WWE didn't have any plans for the New Day. After all, as we saw in the historic following months, they went on to historically break the historical record set by the historical tag team Demolition decades ago as longest reigning WWE World Tag Team Champions in history. They even wrestled twice on the night that they claimed the record on Monday Night Raw, and fought off some of the most over talent on the Raw roster to do it. And also the club were there. Suffice to say, WWE realized that New Day were an invaluable commodity and decided to push them to the moon and back with this unprecedented tag title run. It was huge. There's no disputing that. Not to say that their push was never on shaky ground at times, and it certainly caused a lot of people to grow tired of the New Day as a team that was frequently treading water. But to suggest that the WWE didn't try to capitalize on their potential would be willfully ignorant. So let's look at where the New Day are right now on the current landscape of things following their inevitable loss of the belts. Since losing to Sheamus and Cesaro, they've had a baffling feud with Titus O'Neil where they essentially kept dragging him out from backstage to bully him. Not a fan of that angle myself at all, and I can't think of anybody else who is, but at least it kept the New Day on TV, I suppose. At the Royal Rumble, they were there to enter the match, do New Day stuff, and then leave. Okay, sure. I mean, I don't think they should have won the match or anything, but maybe they could have done something more inventive. Heck, two of them weren't even in the 2016 Royal Rumble, but they still had more presence in that match than they did this year. The Raw after the Rumble, they didn't even appear. Which by itself, of course, doesn't necessarily mean anything. I'm not saying New Day need to be featured in the WWE's most viewed television product the night after a big pay-per-view, but I guess it'd be nice to know why they weren't featured over something such as, I don't know, Enzo and Cass versus Jinder Mahal and Rusev in the climax to their feud that emphasized the blow in Blow-Off match. Following this absence, the New Day returned swiftly to Raw's weekly programming to engage in matches with such talent as the Shining Stars, Bo Dallas, and ultimately Rusev and Jinder Mahal in an ongoing storyline where the New Day are trying to pitch their own brand of ice cream. And hey, I got a few chuckles out of this, so I'm not going to say it was all a huge waste of time. Just the vast majority of it, I suppose. But make no mistake, the WWE still recognizes New Day as a strong part of their brand. And if you need evidence of that, look no further than the fact that New Day were just officially announced as the hosts of this year's WrestleMania. The hosts. This is huge. That's putting them up there with the likes of The Rock, Kim Kardashian, and whoever hosted WrestleMania 4, I forget now. I'll admit, I was initially pissed off when I saw this news. After all, I prefer my active wrestlers to be actively wrestling, and not essentially playing the role of Kermit the Frog on an episode of The Muppet Show. But after spending a good 10 minutes thinking of self-indulgent sarcastic tweets I could post about it, I realized that this is massive for the three superstars. Because now, rather than being in some forgotten match on an ultimately underwhelming WrestleMania pay-per-view card, they get to be remembered as one of the many sensationalized, self-promotional, self-congratulatory, self-celebrational, and self-aware segments that the WWE pushes as the actual focus of WrestleMania these days. Because let's face it, the days when WrestleMania was mostly about the wrestling and storylines are pretty far behind us. I'm not saying there won't be any good matches, or that there won't be any progression of feuds, but it's certainly not the focus of the show at this point. It's like comparing an E3 press conference from 15 years ago to something more recent, like Microsoft dragging Usher on stage to perform his hit song Scream to a crowd of unenthused journalists. Yeah, the context is still the wrestling, but it's been dressed up in a very different outfit to appeal to a much broader audience. So yeah, when you hear that the New Day are hosting WrestleMania, that's a great thing. But here's the question: where do you go from there? In my opinion, the WWE have demonstrated effectively that they think New Day are extremely valuable, but they've also demonstrated that they have no fucking idea what to do with them long term. They're reluctant to do anything remotely different or interesting with them because they think that it's safer to just have them coast on their already established New Day shenanigans, and they seem to think that any attempt to push them from outside of that safety zone would potentially hurt them or someone else they're trying to elevate. They're like an art collector who managed to lay their hands on a priceless painting, but they're reluctant to actually hang it anywhere because they've already covered their walls with pictures of themselves standing next to their brand new Lamborghini. I could be wrong, of course. For all I know, they could have something very special in store for New Day following WrestleMania. Hell, the last time I did one of these videos, I called them out for having no decent storylines on Raw, and in the past few weeks they've had consistently stronger content than SmackDown, and even had one of the best WWE segments ever in the Festival of Friendship. But for argument's sake, let's say that maybe the WWE doesn't have a plan for the three record-breaking tag team champs outside of lame, shoehorned, self-perpetuating comedy segments. What do you do with the New Day? In my opinion, it's bloody obvious. Singles pushes. Now, before you freak out and tell me how wrong I am, because I know you're going to, I'm not suggesting they split the team up at all. In fact, I think it's this kind of tunnel-visioned perspective that has allowed the WWE to squander a lot of genuinely great teams in the past. Too many times we've seen it play out where a couple or more wrestlers will team up only to suddenly decide that they are only aware of or interested in the tag team titles because they believe it's all they qualify for now. And that's fucking dull, and it only makes the product seem shallower. Just like how when someone turns face after being a heel for a significant amount of time, all the other faces on the roster are suddenly best friends with them. It doesn't work that way on any other TV show of any kind, so why should it work that way here? Nothing better showcases the WWE's difference in attitude, so to speak, towards stables than the various iterations of Degeneration X. Originally, you had Shawn Michaels, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, and Chyna. You didn't see them challenging for the tag titles on a consistent basis or even at all because they weren't a tag team. They were just people who teamed up. Then later down the line, you had Triple H, X-Pac, Road Dogg, Billy Gunn, and Chyna. And each of these superstars wrestled for the tag titles, the Intercontinental title, the Hardcore title, and the WWE title at various points in the stable's history. Then skip ahead to 2009, and you have the return of Degeneration X, who are now being heralded as the greatest tag team in the history of the WWE. Which is funny, because last time I checked, they were never a fucking tag team. But suddenly that's exclusively how they're being pitched, consistently and constantly, as a tag team with very few deviations. And I'm not going to go into any of the backstage politics or anything like that. Suffice to say that if I were to pin the blame on anything, It would be branding. The WWE has understandably become obsessed with branding, from saying things like WWE Universe instead of fans, to this, saying that because two men are teamed up, they are now a tag team and must never stray from this very strict and rigid path that this limits them to. And that's all well and good from a business perspective, but at the same time, when you give the New Day the longest tag title reign in history, and then make them the hosts of your biggest pay-per-view ever, what more is there to be done with them? As a tag team, not all that much. So why not treat them like a traditional wrestling stable and let them expand their horizons? Look at even a current stable like Sanity from NXT. You have a potential headliner in Eric Young. You have Alexander Wolf and Sawyer Fulton as your tag team. You have a strong women's talent in Nikki Cross. Now, I'm not saying you need to introduce more talent to the New Day, but look at this. They have all the bases covered. There's no need to worry about whether they're branded as a tag team, a main eventer, a superstar, a diva, a butcher, a baker, a candlestick maker. They're all brands in one. Sanity is the brand, not the structure of the group. Let New Day dictate the New Day brand, not whatever bracket they're assigned to. So here's what I would suggest, and you'll forgive me if I indulge in a little fantasy booking here. Presumably, Brock Lesnar will face Goldberg for the WWE Universal title at Mania and ultimately win it from him. That's not set in stone, but it seems to be where we're going. Now, what if before the main event, the New Day came out to introduce the match or promote their ice cream or look for Kofi's charisma? I don't know. But while they're out there on the stage, Brock Lesnar's music hits and Paul Heyman comes out and says something like, "Nobody's here to see a bunch of fools dance around like a cheap comedy act. They're here to see the Beast, Brock Lesnar, tear it up with Goldberg." New Day acts affronted, but then Lesnar comes out and intimidates them. Kofi and Xavier wisely back off, but Big E stares him down. Brock laughs him off or maybe even locks eyes with him in a kinda do-something manner. But the important thing is that Big E and Lesnar have a moment. Maybe Lesnar even suplexes or F5s all of the New Day to say the jokes are over, it's time to get serious. Lesnar wins the title that night, and Goldberg retires gracefully. Or as gracefully as a man who frequently busts himself open walking to the ring can be. Then the next night on Raw, Lesnar flaunts his accomplishment, saying that he proved everyone wrong. He proved that Goldberg's wins were a fluke, etc. And then he states that nobody has the guts to face him after he squashed that wannabe superhero. Nobody has the power to stop Suplex City. New Day's music hits, and Big E strides out, flanked by a significantly less imposing Xavier and Kofi. Maybe they try and talk some sense into him, but it's not enough. Big E's pride is as thick as he is. And he gets on the mic and talks a big game at Lesnar, saying that no matter how powerful his suplexes are, they're no match for the power of positivity. Brock laughs, doesn't take any of it seriously, thinking this is all part of some comedy sketch that they're doing. Maybe Heyman even congratulates Big E on the funniest gag they've ever pulled off, thinking that he can stand in the ring with the Beast. Then Big E tries to stare down Lesnar again, and Lesnar obliges very casually. Then maybe he turns to go walk away, and Big E grabs him, and that's all it takes for Lesnar to start suplexing him from one side of the ring to the other. It's total carnage, and it keeps going until finally Woods and Kingston can't take it anymore, and they rush the ring to defend their friend. Lesnar can get in a few suplexes, Xavier can use Francesca 2 Turbo to fend him off, but ultimately, Lesnar leaves his mark on Big E and then leaves. Lesnar is then gone for several weeks, what with the whole part-time contract thing. And this gives New Day an opportunity to start calling him out. Kofi and Xavier have Big E's back, and they're supporting him in his challenge to fight Lesnar. It's a team effort without it looking like they're trying to outnumber Brock. It's just two guys supporting their friend. Then eventually, when Lesnar feels it's time to return, he interrupts one of their promos to suplex Kofi, suplex Xavier, but then maybe Big E catches him by surprise after one and hits him with a suplex. This leaves Brock stunned, and he gets up, and then Big E traps him in the abdominal stretch and starts spanking his ass to the chants of New Day Rocks from the crowd. It infuriates Lesnar. He goes to suplex Big E, but he's already rolled out of the ring. He's left his mark on the Beast. Now, I already know that a lot of you are thinking, what the hell are you talking about? Why would anybody care about a gag character like Big E fighting the behemoth that is Lesnar? Well, here's my reasoning, and admittedly, some of this does take some suspension of disbelief. Brock doesn't have many main eventers he can face where people will take his opponents seriously. He's faced so many of these guys one-on-one, especially on Raw, and made them look like jokes. Outside of maybe Roman Reigns, it's hard to believe that someone like, say, Seth Rollins has a chance against him after the way they made him look in their match match at Battleground 2016. So why not go with that? If nobody can be taken seriously, use the fact that Big E is this big, goofy, grinning monster of a wrestler to play against type. And here's the thing, there's nothing wrong with Big E being a comedic character in my opinion. I hate to make the comparison, but a lot of heroic characters in anime are pretty fucking goofy until they put their game face on and take care of business. That's the sort of main eventer that Big E could be. Not saying he even has to wear a title around his waist, but have him be the guy who is all fun and games and willing to play to the kids in the crowd until someone tries to rile him up and he starts throwing guys left and right. It's also the perfect timing to take advantage of the fact that Lesnar just got treated like a joke by Goldberg twice in a row, at Survivor Series and at the Rumble. So Big E would represent his insecurity. It'd be like looking at himself in a funhouse mirror and being terrified of the implications that after Goldberg exposed his weaknesses, he isn't the top guy anymore. Big E is strong enough, charismatic enough, and liked by the audience enough that people would get behind him fighting against Lesnar, in my opinion. Especially if he had the support of his teammates. Because this right here is the key element to what could be a memorable feud. A lot of people may not think that on paper Big E stands a chance, but if Kofi and Xavier backed him up, not necessarily in the match but from the outside as his cheer squad or as training buddies, it'd be a heck of a story to watch play out. And again, I don't think Big E needs to win the feud, but I think it'd be a great opportunity to have him stand toe-to-toe in the main event and show that New Day can be more than catchphrases, booty-branded merchandising, and reminders that they held the tag titles for a long time. Let New Day be a team, and let them support one of their teammates in a singles feud. It'd be infinitely more interesting than watching them haze jobbers week in and week out, with no promise of payoff in the long term. I've posited all of this on Twitter in the past, and a lot of people think Big E has had his chance in the spotlight, and that he simply doesn't have what it takes to be a main eventer. And that's plausible, I won't deny it, but at the same time, I think that with as over as New Day has been, with the fact that they're hosting the biggest pay-per-view of the year, the fact that they're such a strong, positive, fun presence for kids and even some adults, I don't see the harm in having one of them be the hero try to take down the biggest bully in the playground. I don't think any of this is actually going to happen, and I certainly don't believe the WWE even agrees with me that New Day could diversify into singles competition. Not without splitting them up at least, which is why it's so frustrating to see such huge potential go to waste. I'd much rather they move New Day over to SmackDown and reinvigorate their stagnant tag division than see them have to split up to pursue singles belts. I feel, and I feel like a lot of other people feel it too, that WWE too often takes the safe bet rather than make the risks that could pay off tenfold. And that's a shame. I feel that taking risks is what caused each of the most pivotal moments in their history. WrestleMania itself was an enormous risk. The Attitude Era was a huge risk, but they were risks that had to be made for the company to evolve as a part of the landscape of television. I feel New Day could contribute to another evolution, obviously not nearly as grand as those, but into a wrestling era where the sports entertainment we see every week doesn't have to adhere to convention or the rules of branding. I think a goofy monster like Big E would make for a compelling character in the main event scene. I think New Day themselves shouldn't break up just because they've done everything they can do as a tag team, because if that's all they have, then they're done already. There is nowhere for them to go but sideways. Do you agree? Do you passionately disagree? Let me know in the comments, because I'd love to hear what you guys think about the New Day's potential, whether they have any or whether you're just sick of the sight of them. I don't think they're done for at all, but the WWE staunchly refuses to understand their value as a unit, just not as a tag team, but also as individuals. But what do I know? Hope you all have a bootylicious week, and toodle pip.